Welcome back to the deep dive. We gather your sources, stack them up, and go straight to the knowledge that matters. Today we're dusting off our togas, heading back to ancient Rome, specifically 55 BCE.
That's exactly right. We're diving into the world of Marcus Tullius Cicero, one of history's giants when it comes to thinking about influence, leadership, and speaking powerfully. Our main text today is his work, the Orator.
Now, when you think about great speakers today, politicians, CEOs, maybe even social media figures, what usually gets the focus?
Oh, it's almost always the style, right? The charisma, the slick presentation, how smooth they sound, the technique.
Exactly. But Cicero, back in 55 BCE, he threw down a challenge. His core idea, the thing we're really digging into, seems almost, well, countercultural today.
It really is. He basically argued that all that technique, it's secondary.
Secondary to what?
Secondary to the person behind the words. Cicero's saying that what truly makes a speaker great, not just good, is their moral character, their integrity, their intellectual depth.
So if you're brilliant with words but maybe ethically shaky, Cicero would say you're missing the most important part.
Precisely. He believed true, lasting influence has to be rooted in something much deeper than just a good performance. Without that moral purpose, that broad understanding, any impact you have is likely to be shallow, or worse, actually harmful to the community, the republic, as he would say.
Wow. Okay, so he's setting an incredibly high bar. It's not just about public speaking skills. He wants the ideal orator to be a kind of philosopher king almost, a moral compass for the state.
That's the radical challenge he lays out. It goes straight back to the Greek idea of ethos. Credibility. There's that line from the sources, a life of virtue is the most powerful speech of all.
A life of virtue is the best speech. I like that.
It means your character is communicating long before you even open your mouth. If the audience doesn't fundamentally trust you, the person, why should your clever argument sway them?
Okay, let's unpack this because it really does fly in the face of so much modern communication advice, doesn't it? That focus on image management, on crafting the perfect message.
It does. Cicero's model suggests that even the most technically brilliant speaker, if they lack that core integrity, well, their influence won't, or at least shouldn't, last. It'll eventually be seen for what it is.
It must have been a tough line for Cicero himself to walk, though. He was a practical politician, deeply involved in Roman life, but also a serious philosopher.
Absolutely. He knew rhetoric handbooks and techniques were useful, practical tools. But he insisted that the foundation had to be philosophy, ethics. It wasn't just about learning tricks. It was about how you lived, who you were.
So let's get into that ancient blueprint he laid out in the Oratore. Through the character Crassus, he details what's required for real eloquence. What are the building blocks?
Right. Crassus argues that truly great oratory is rare because it demands three key things working together before you even get to the studying part.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's naturum. That's your inherent nature, your raw talent, and think, a good voice, a strong memory, physical presence, the gifts you're born with.
Got it. Natural ability. What's second?
Second is ingenium. This is trickier to translate. It's like genius, innate mental sharpness, quickness of thought, insight, the capacity for deep thinking.
So you need the natural physical gifts and this innate mental horsepower. You can't just have one.
According to Crassus, no, not for the highest level. And only after you have both naturum and ingenium does the third element really come into play effectively.
Which is?
Systematic study. And this is crucial. Crassus felt that earlier teachers of rhetoric failed because they just offered rules and techniques. They didn't necessarily have the foundational nature or genius themselves, and they didn't demand it in their students.
And Cicero's idea of study wasn't just practicing speeches, was it?
Not at all. It was incredibly broad. It meant mastering Roman history, understanding the law inside and out, and crucially, grounding yourself in philosophy and ethics.
Wow. So the ideal orator had to be one of the most knowledgeable people around, across the board. Law, history, morality.
Yes. Cicero talks about needing these quick, sharp movements of the mind, animi atque ingeni celeres quidem motus, to grasp complex issues instantly. You needed to pull up historical examples, legal points, ethical principles, almost without thinking. That's what rigorous, systematic study trained you to do.
Okay, so you've got the talent, the genius, the deep knowledge. But Why develop all this? What's the ultimate goal Cicero presents for this powerful orator?
It's framed almost entirely in terms of civic duty and community benefit. It's not about personal gain or just winning arguments for ego. The goal is achieving glory to yourselves, yes, but also being a source of service to your friends and ultimately becoming profitable members of the Republic.
Profitable members,
Uh-huh.
meaning contributing value to the state.
Exactly. The orator's skill is seen as a vital asset for the Republic. If you're just using it for yourself, you're actually failing Cicero's test from the start.
That makes the power he describes even more significant because it's supposed to be wielded by someone fundamentally committed to the public good. How much power are we talking about?
Cicero's description is, well, it's quite striking. He suggests this ideal orator, the one with proven character and skill, can have an almost overwhelming effect on an audience. He says they can influence the emotions animos ita officia to the point where they can drag or snatch the audience wherever they want them to go.
Hang on, drag or snatch, that sounds really manipulative, almost like the exact opposite of a virtuous speaker. How does that square with the whole moral foundation?
That's the critical tension, isn't it? The power of rhetoric itself, the ability to stir emotions and move crowds, is inherently neutral. It's a tool, a potentially dangerous one.
So the morality isn't in the tool, it's in the person using it.
Precisely. Cicero's argument is that only the truly virtuous orator, the one grounded in ethics and committed to the Republic's good, should be trusted with that kind of power, because their character acts as a kind of safeguard. It ensures that the dragging or snatching is directed towards justice, towards the common good, towards necessary action for the state.
Whereas in the hands of someone without that moral compass,
It becomes demagoguery, pure manipulation. That's the ever-present danger he's warning against.
this must have been debated even within the dialogue itself, right? This tension between skill and virtue.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a character named Scaevola, who raises some important questions. He acts as a bit of a skeptical voice within De Orator.
What's his issue?
Well, Crassus makes this grand claim early on that it was basically orators, wise speakers, who persuaded primitive humans to form societies and establish laws that orators founded the state. Scaevola pushes back on that.
Why? What's his counterargument?
Scaevola represents a more traditional Roman view. He values ancestral customs, established laws, the mos maiorum. He's wary of giving too much credit or power to individual rhetorical skill. His point is basically, hold on, the state wasn't built just by clever talkers. It was built by people of action, courage, legal minds, established traditions, often before sophisticated rhetoric even really existed.
So he's worried that focusing too much on the skill of the orator might overshadow the fundamental principles the Republic was built on.
Exactly. He fears technique becoming more important than substance, than the foundational civic virtues. This dialogue between Crassus and Scaevola is important because it shows Cicero grappling with this very tension. He's trying to fuse that powerful rhetorical skill with the solid traditional values Scaevola represents.
Okay, that's a perfect bridge then to the philosophical underpinnings. If Cicero wants to merge skill with virtue, he's drawing on a long tradition, especially from the Greeks, about rhetoric's relationship to truth.
Yes, absolutely. This gets us into the connection between rhetoric and dialectic, which Aristotle famously explored.
Remind us of that distinction again. Dialectic is.
Dialectic is the rigorous, logical method of philosophical argument. It starts with opinions, sure, but its goal is to arrive at certain knowledge, at capital T truth, through strict, reasoned debate. Think Socratic method, formal logic.
Okay, the search for certainty. And rhetoric.
Rhetoric operates in a different sphere. It's the art of persuasion in practical civic life. The courts, the assemblies, political debates. It deals with probabilities, likelihoods, what's expedient, or just in a particular situation. The orator isn't necessarily proving absolute philosophical truth. They're arguing for the best course of action, the most just verdict, based on the available evidence and what the audience believes is probable or right.
So dialectic aims for knowledge, rhetoric aims for persuasion based on belief or probability. How does Cicero connect these?
Cicero's demanding that the master of rhetoric, the art of persuasion, must first be deeply grounded in dialectic, the pursuit of truth and wisdom. That philosophical grounding provides the moral and intellectual bedrock. Without it, the orator is just manipulating opinions, building arguments on sand. They might be persuasive in the short term, but they lack true substance.
Which sounds exactly like the kind of speaker Plato warned against.
Precisely. And that brings us squarely to Plato's critique, especially in the dialogue Gorgias. Socrates really goes after the dangers of power wielded without a moral compass.
Right. What does Socrates say is the aim of the true politician or statesman?
It's simple and radical. Socrates insists the true politician necessarily aims at the good of the citizens in his charge. Full stop.
Not popularity, not power for its own sake.
No, those are secondary, maybe even irrelevant. The focus must be on the genuine well-being of the people. Anything else, for Socrates, isn't true statesmanship. It's flattery or manipulation. Demagoguery again.
And this leads to that crucial point about belief versus knowledge, which feels incredibly relevant today with misinformation and all that.
It's so relevant. Socrates gets Gorgias, the rhetorician, to admit that oratory often produces conviction based on belief, not conviction based on knowledge.
What's the difference there?
Belief can be true or it can be false. You can passionately believe something that simply isn't true. Knowledge, true knowledge, must be based on reality, on truth. So if an orator is only skilled at creating belief, they're operating in the realm of appearances. They can persuade people of falsehoods. And worse, they might even deceive themselves.
Which ties right back to Cicero wanting the orator to have that deep internal grounding. You need to know the truth yourself before you try to persuade others.
Exactly. And Socrates pushes this idea to an astonishing conclusion. He talks about the greatest evil.
What does he identify as the greatest evil? It's not suffering injustice, is it?
No, incredibly, it isn't. Socrates argues that the greatest evil is doing injustice, especially if you get away with it.
How does he figure that? Most people would rather do wrong than suffer wrong.
Socrates claims that people who do terrible things, tyrants, corrupt officials, dishonest speakers, are fundamentally acting out of ignorance. They don't truly understand what's good for them or for their own souls.
Ignorance. They often look incredibly successful, powerful, wealthy.
But they're ignorant of true happiness, which Socrates argues can only come from virtue, from a good soul. They pursue power or pleasure thinking that's the ultimate good, but they're mistaken. When someone acts unjustly, they damage their own soul, create a badness of soul. And if they avoid punishment, that damage never gets corrected. Their soul remains sick, and that, for Socrates, is the worst possible state. It's the ultimate ignorance.
So that famous line, one should avoid doing wrong with more care than being wronged, is about protecting your own inner moral core.
Precisely. Suffering wrong might cause external pain or loss, but doing wrong corrupts you internally, and that internal corruption is the far greater harm.
Okay, that provides a powerful philosophical justification for why Cicero insists the order must be fundamentally good, because only a good person, one who understands true value, can avoid that inner corruption and guide others rightly.
Exactly, and Aristotle builds on this. He brings it back to the practicalities of speaking and how character is revealed in the moment.
How does Aristotle connect speech directly to revealing character?
In his rhetoric, Aristotle talks about the use of maxims. These are like short, pithy, general statements about life or human nature, proverbs almost.
Okay, like honesty is the best policy or something like that?
Sort of, yes. Aristotle points out that the kinds of maxims a speaker chooses to use and the way they use them reveal their underlying character and values. They show the universal basis of one's choices.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If a speaker constantly uses cynical maxims, maybe things like, everyone's just out for themselves or power is all that matters, what does that tell you about their worldview, their character?
Yeah, it suggests they're probably cynical and maybe untrustworthy themselves.
Right. Conversely, if their maxims consistently reflect ideals like justice, courage, or public service, even if they're arguing a tough case, it helps establish their moral standing with the audience. It's a direct link back to Cicero. The words you choose, even these small general statements, reflect the core of who you are.
And this line of thinking, connecting rhetoric firmly to ethics, continues after Cicero, doesn't it? With Quintilian.
Yes, Quintilian, writing a bit later, was maybe the most explicit about this. He was a teacher focused on educating the ideal Roman orator. And for him, moral philosophy, ethics, wasn't just a nice add-on. He argued it was entirely suited to the orator, absolutely essential.
Why did he see it as so fundamental?
Because, as he pointed out, look at the actual cases orators deal with. So many legal disputes hinge on questions of equity and virtue, what's fair, what's right. And even in political debates, deliberative oratory, you constantly have to address what is honorable or just for the state. You simply can't be an effective orator in these arenas without a strong grasp of ethics.
So the subject matter itself demands moral understanding.
Absolutely. And this leads Quintilian to his test of integrity. This is really crucial. He says, the good man, who he believes the ideal orator needs more than just book learning about virtue. He must have grasped its meaning and acquired a true feeling for it.
A true feeling. Not just knowing the definition of justice, but feeling its pull, its obligation.
Exactly. It has to be internalized, part of your very being, not just words you trot out. Only then, Quintilian says, will the orator speak out truly what he knows. The conviction comes from that deep internal place.
That prevents the orator from just being a skilled actor, playing the part of a virtuous person.
Right. And it's also Quintilian's defense against the old criticism of rhetoric, the fear that it's just a tool for manipulation, helping criminals escape justice or making bad arguments sound good.
How does he defend rhetoric against that charge?
His argument is quite practical and, I think, sound. He says the problem isn't the art of rhetoric itself. The fault lies with the person using the art. He compares rhetoric to medicine, or being a general. Medicine is a good art, but a doctor could use it to poison someone. Does that mean medicine itself is bad? No. We condemn the doctor.
Or a general leading an unjust war.
Exactly. The skill isn't inherently evil. It's the intent and the character of the person wielding the skill that matters. So for Quintilian, you don't ban rhetoric. You ensure the orator is a person of good character.
Okay, so we have this really strong, consistent line from Plato through Cicero to Quintilian. Character is paramount. The speaker must be good. How does this ancient ideal hold up when we look at the modern world? Things seem different now.
It's fascinating how these ancient concerns echo, sometimes loudly, in modern times. You see people grappling with the exact same tension. Skill versus substance, technique versus integrity.
Where do we see that echo most clearly?
Well, Theodore Roosevelt, for one. A man of action, certainly, and very smart. But he seemed acutely aware of the dangers of intelligence or competence operating in a moral vacuum.
What did he say about it?
He gave this really powerful warning. It sounds like something Cicero or Quintilian could have said. Roosevelt stated, "There is not in all America a more dangerous trait than the deification of mere smartness unaccompanied by any sense of moral responsibility."
The deification of mere smartness. Wow, that hits hard, doesn't it? Especially today.
It really does. It speaks directly to our tendency to admire technical skill, the ability to build a company, win a case, code an algorithm sometimes, without asking enough about the ethical framework guiding that skill. Roosevelt is echoing that ancient fear. Highly capable people, if they're not anchored by strong ethics, can actually become a danger to society. Their ingenium, their smartness, can be used for selfish ends, or worse.
It validates Gavela's worry about skilled individuals undermining the foundations if they're not grounded.
Precisely. And you see this same tension explored in a lot of modern leadership and even self-help thinking. Stephen Covey's work is a prime example.
Right. Covey made that famous distinction between two ethics.
Yes, the personality ethic versus the character ethic.
Break that down for us. Personality ethic is...
The personality ethic focuses on the surface. It's about public image, attitudes, skills, techniques. Things like communication strategies, positive thinking techniques, how you dress, how you present yourself. It's about managing appearances.
Trying to seem effective, confident, trustworthy.
Exactly. It's often about quick fixes and manipulating perceptions. The character ethic, on the other hand, runs much deeper.
Okay, what's the foundation of the character ethic?
It's built on fundamental principles, things Covey saw as universal and timeless. Integrity, humility, fidelity, courage, justice, patience, industry, the bedrock virtues. Covey argues that true success, true effectiveness, and even self-respect don't come from polishing the surface. They come from dominion over self, from true independence based on these principles.
And he believed people can sense the difference.
Absolutely. He said, if your words and actions are just flowing from superficial techniques, from the personality ethic, rather than from your inner core of character, eventually others will sense that duplicity. There's a lack of congruence.
People can tell when someone isn't genuine, when their actions don't match their words over time.
Right. And Covey had that great, simple line that just perfectly captures Cicero's point. You can't talk your way out of problems you behave yourself into.
Ah, that's good. Behavior trumps talk.
It underscores the whole idea. Integrity has to come first. Your character is the foundation. If that's solid, based on principles, it gives you security, guidance, wisdom, power. It creates that congruency and harmony that people instinctively trust.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense philosophically and theoretically. Let's bring it down to earth. Can we look at some historical figures whose influence really seemed to stem from this kind of moral authority, where character was the message?
Yes, let's look at some examples where the power clearly came from more than just rhetorical skill. Abraham Lincoln comes immediately to mind.
Especially with something like the Gettysburg Address, right? It's incredibly short, but monumentally powerful.
Exactly. Only 272 words. What gives it that enduring weight? It's not flowery language or complex arguments. It's the way Lincoln connects the brutal sacrifice of the war directly to a profound, foundational moral principle.
He wasn't just dedicating a cemetery. He was rededicating the nation itself.
He framed the whole struggle around the nation being conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He elevated the immediate bloody conflict into a defense of that core moral idea. His power derived from linking the soldier's sacrifice to this timeless ethical purpose laid out in the founding documents. That's moral oratory at its purest. The weight of his character and the principles he invoked carried the day.
Now consider Frederick Douglass. His power often came from the opposite direction, from exposing the gap between professed ideals and reality.
Douglass was a master of moral indictment. His famous speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" is a searing example. He used the very celebration of American freedom to highlight the staggering hypocrisy of a nation that celebrated liberty while enslaving millions.
He turned the nation's own stated values against its practices, a very powerful rhetorical move.
Incredibly powerful. He forced his audience into an inescapable moral corner. And he didn't hold back, even against powerful institutions like the church.
What was his critique of the church's role?
He called them out, accusing them of being stupidly blind or most wickedly indifferent regarding the fugitive slave law, which forced people to return escaped slaves. He argued that the church's silence, its failure to condemn this injustice, stripped it of its moral authority. It turned religion into an empty ceremony instead of a force for act of benevolence, justice, love, and goodwill towards man.
So, by exposing their moral failure, he effectively neutralized their credibility, their ethos. It's the inverse of Cicero's point. Fail the character test and your words lose their power.
Exactly. A perfect illustration. Now think about a different kind of influence, maybe less confrontational, but equally rooted in character. Russell H. Conwell.
Known for that incredibly popular lecture, Acres of Diamonds, right?
That's the one. He delivered it thousands of times. His message was essentially about finding opportunity right where you are, that wealth could be achieved honestly. But why did people believe him? Why did it resonate so much? A huge part of it was Conwell's own reputation and actions. He was described as simple and homelike, human and unaffected. People felt he was genuine. But more importantly, he lived his message.
How so? What did he do?
Well, the vast sums of money he earned from giving that lecture, he didn't hoard it. He used it to found Temple University in Philadelphia.
Temple University came from that one lecture.
Primarily, yes. The sources say it helped nearly 100,000 young people get education and move into a higher income and nobler life. He also founded hospitals that served the poor. He was seen as this unusual combination, a dreamer with immense practicality. His life's work was tangible proof backing up his words about achieving wealth honestly and using it for good. His character validated his speech.
That's a powerful connection between word and deed. Let's consider one more figure, someone whose journey involved a very public change in perspective, Malcolm X.
Malcolm X is fascinating in this context. His early power, his initial influence, certainly came from a place of ruthless honesty. He articulated the anger and pain of Black Americans with incredible force.
But his views changed significantly later in his life.
They did. And that change itself speaks volumes about his underlying integrity. It required what the sources call a fundamental rearrangement of his deepest beliefs and thought patterns.
That must have been incredibly difficult, especially publicly.
Extremely difficult. It demanded a willingness to confront facts that contradicted his long-held ideology, particularly regarding race. After his pilgrimage to Mecca, he spoke about having to face the reality of life as new experience and new knowledge unfolds it. He witnessed what he described as sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together. And that experience forced him to abandon his earlier separatist views.
So his integrity wasn't about rigidly sticking to his old ideas, but about aligning himself with what he came to see as a deeper truth, even though it was costly.
Exactly. That willingness to change, to admit error, to grow based on new understanding, that demonstrated a profound kind of character, a commitment to truth over dogma. And arguably, it deepened his moral authority in the long run.
Okay, we've seen the power of character in action. But let's loop back to the danger Cicero and Plato warned about the absence of virtue. Specifically, what about indifference?
Indifference. Elie Wiesel, who lived through the Holocaust and dedicated his life to bearing witness, offered some incredibly profound insights here. He saw indifference not just as inaction, but as something much more sinister.
What did you say about it? How bad is indifference?
Weisel stated it plainly, indifference is the opposite of culture, faith, morality. He went so far as to say that in some ways, indifference can be equal to evil.
Equal to evil? That's a heavy statement.
Yeah.
What's the thinking there?
His point was that we recognize active evil, hatred, violence. We condemn it. But indifference, apathy, looking the other way, that often gets a pass. But Weisel argued indifference isn't neutral. It's an active choice not to care, not to intervene. And by not intervening, it effectively enables evil. It becomes complicity.
And he saw this playing out on a massive scale.
He argued forcefully that the Holocaust wasn't just the result of the perfect killers. It was also fueled, enabled by the massive indifference surrounding the killers and the victims. The failure of governments, institutions, ordinary people to act, to speak out based on moral conviction that created the vacuum where the atrocity could happen. It was a catastrophic failure of moral will, a failure of the kind of engaged, ethical leadership Cicero envisioned.
So the ultimate tragedy serves as a terrifying proof of what happens when that moral core is missing, when indifference reigns. It validates Cicero's fear that without virtue, the state itself is endangered.
It absolutely does. It shows the devastating cost when self-interest, apathy, or fear override the civic and moral responsibility that Cicero saw as essential for the orator and indeed for any citizen.
Okay, so let's try to pull all these threads together. We've gone from Cicero's Rome through Greek philosophy, modern thinkers, and historical giants. What's the big takeaway from this deep dive into the moral orator?
I think the biggest takeaway is just how remarkably consistent and relevant Cicero's core argument remains across, well, 2 millennia. His insistence that the orator must be a person of character isn't just some quaint ideal. It seems to be a fundamental requirement for genuine, lasting influence.
Yeah.
You see it echoed in Plato's demand for seeking the reality of goodness, not just appearance. You see it in Quintilian's focus on ethics and that true feeling for virtue. And you see its power, or the lack thereof, in the lives of figures like Lincoln, Douglas, Roosevelt, Weisel. It really seems to boil down to this. The substance of the speaker is the substance of the speech.
So at the end of the day, the real power isn't in having the slickest presentation or the cleverest arguments. It's about being someone people can actually trust, someone whose character backs up their words.
Exactly. So for you listening, what does this really mean? It suggests that true influence isn't about mastering techniques to persuade people to believe something temporarily. It's about becoming the kind of person who is inherently worthy of belief. Because if that character foundation isn't there, all the rhetorical skill in the world is just surface. It's that personality ethic Covey talked about. People will likely sense the duplicity and the influence won't last.
And it comes back to that phrase from Quintilian, grasping virtue by true feeling, not just intellectually.
That's the heart of it, isn't it? It has to be lived, felt, demonstrated. Which leads us to a final thought for you to consider. Since the ultimate power of communication seems to rest on the speaker's character, and since virtue demands action, not just words, what action could you take, maybe even today, that would serve as undeniable proof of the integrity behind whatever message matters most to you?
Because until your actions align with your words
Your words might just be noise.